Takemichi was a miserable guy who thought he was the definition of a loser. He had no money, no chicks, no friends to back him up, and was stuck in this rough cycle where he could barely pay rent, constantly got bullied by younger kids, and felt like his worthless life was going nowhere. After losing his first girlfriend, Hinata Takabana, he completely fell apart. He'd never found anyone like her again, and it haunted him. He was feeling trapped, lost, and alone. One day, while moping around, someone pushed him onto the train tracks. Right as he thought he'd be taking his last breath, his mind flashed back to Hinata. But then something totally strange happened. Instead of dying, Takemichi found himself back in his teenage body, looking at a younger version of himself in the mirror. He checked his phone and realized he'd somehow gone back 12 years to when he was in middle school. At first, he felt surprised, even a little relieved to see his old self and his childhood junkies again. But as the memories of that day came flooding back, he remembered the horrors that happened on this exact date. Before he could do anything, though, his group was jumped by a bunch of older thugs. One of his friends tried to cool things down by saying they were tight with a guy named Masaru, who was the gang's leader, but the thugs laughed at his ugly face, forcing Masaru to fetch drinks and nearly beating the group senseless. Takemichi felt like he was watching his worst memories unfold all over again. This was the day that everything went downhill for him, and he yelled in frustration at being forced to relive this painful experience. But then, he remembered Hinata and realized that the same gang was tied to her future death. With this thought in mind, he rushed off to find her, hoping to at least see her one last time. When she opened the door and saw his bruised face, she looked at him with concern, and, used to being treated poorly, he couldn't hold back his tears. As he tried to leave, she stopped him, encouraging him to talk about what had happened. He let it all out, like a crybaby. Later, while he was sulking alone on a swing, he noticed some kids picking on a short nerd nearby. Fed up with seeing people get pushed around, he stood up, scared the bullies off by smashing a bottle and threatening them, then offered some advice to the kid, telling him to stand up for himself. The boy introduced himself as Naoto, and Takemichi realized that Naoto was Hinata's younger brother, someone he knew would also die in the future. Feeling like he had nothing to lose, Takemichi told Naoto the unbelievable truth, that he was a time traveler sent back after surviving a deadly accident. Shockingly, Naoto believed him, especially when Takemichi warned him to protect his sister from a tragedy 12 years in the future. When they shook hands to seal the promise, Takemichi suddenly found himself yanked back to the present. He woke up in a hospital bed, a little shaken but unharmed, and thought the whole experience was just a weird dream. But then he met a grown-up Naoto, now a detective. Naoto explained that he had taken Takemichi's words seriously, and worked hard to become a cop to protect his family. Despite his best efforts, he hadn't been able to save Hinata, who had still died due to gang violence. Naoto told Takemichi that his ability to travel back in time was real, and he was the only one who could prevent Hinata's death. He explained that every time they shook hands, Takemichi would jump exactly 12 years into the past. Determined to save Hinata, Takemichi agreed to try again. Naoto made him stay up all night studying the Tokyo Manji gang, showing him a picture of a friend who had died trying to bring down the gang from the inside. Naoto explained that the only way to change the future was to stop the gang's current leaders from meeting. Desperate, Takemichi agreed to travel back once more by shaking Naoto's hand. When he arrived in the past, he landed right in the middle of a fistfight but was too scared to follow through, ending up knocked out. When he woke up, Takemichi remembered how he and his friends were forced to work under the gang's thumb all through middle school. But this time, he got so angry he declared he wanted to meet the gang leaders. The other gang members beat him up like my ex beating cockroaches for even asking, and he ran away, feeling like he'd failed again. Lost and hopeless, he went to Hinata's house to meet Naoto, where she laughed at him for always getting into trouble. She told him to man up and stop crying like a f***ing child. They laughed together, and for a moment, he felt okay, as if he'd forgotten why he'd come in the first place. The next morning, he met up with his friends at the school bathroom, where he found out that his friend Takuya, the weakest member of their group, was being set up to fight someone from a rival school. Everyone knew he can't even beat a child, but Takuya insisted he would avenge Takemichi. When they arrived at the fight, Takuya was shaking like a leaf, about to give up before the match even began. Out of nowhere, Takemichi yelled for the fight to stop and walked straight up to Kiyomasa, the gang leader, challenging him to a one-on-one match. Kiyomasa accepted, thrilled to put Takemichi in his place, and started beating him up until Takemichi could barely stand. Just when it looked like Takemichi was done for, he refused to quit, pushing himself to keep going despite the beating. His friends begged him to stop, but he just yelled that he was going to win or die trying. Kiyomasa laughed and was about to end it, but then a tall guy with blonde hair entered the scene. The crowd fell silent as they recognized him as Draken, the Tokyo Manji gang's vice commander. Right behind him was a shorter guy, Sano Manjiro, also known as Mikey, the gang's leader. Mikey walked past Kiyomasa and told Takemichi he admired his guts, calling him his new friend. Takemichi was stunned but didn't have time to react as Mikey went on to beat Kiyomasa for setting up the fight in the first place. Afterward, he left the scene with Draken, leaving Takemichi and his friends in awe. That night, Takemichi's friends couldn't stop yelling him up for standing up to Kiyomasa and even becoming buddies with Mikey, the leader of the Tokyo Manji gang. But deep down, Takemichi didn't feel like some big hero. He figured he'd just leveled up to a higher slave rank. As they were all joking around, his friend Etsushi opened up, admitting he'd been so furious during the fight that he actually thought about killing Kiyomasa. He thanked Takemichi for stepping in and saving them from the biker gang. The next morning, Takemichi was dragging himself to school, struggling to even open his eyes. But his exhaustion disappeared the moment Hinata approached him, asking if he'd like to go on a date later. Excited, he was wide awake now. While trying to keep his focus in class, he heard a commotion outside. To his shock, Mikey walked right into the classroom, inviting Takemichi to hang out with him and Draken. He looked out the window and saw that Draken had actually beaten up all the third-year students single-handedly. Draken even made the defeated guys lie down on the ground and stepped on them as if they were rugs, which they were. Takemichi tried to decline, saying he already had plans, but everyone was too stunned to see the leaders of the Tokyo Manji gang at their school. Suddenly, Hinata came up to Mikey and slapped him in the face, grabbing Takemichi's hand to pull him away from the gang members. Draken held her back, threatening to rip her arms off, but Takemichi, determined to protect her, stood his ground, gripping Draken's shoulder and telling him to let go. Hinata was someone he'd never give up on, no matter what. Mikey looked disappointed, saying it was time for Takemichi to meet his fate. But Takemichi refused to back down, saying that Hinata meant more to him than any friendship. Amused by Takemichi's boldness, Mikey stopped mid-punch, then laughed and called him an idiot for thinking he'd hurt him over a girl. Draken even called Takemichi a legend for defending Hinata against impossible odds. Realizing she might have messed up, Hinata apologized to Mikey for the slap. But Mikey reassured her, saying he respected anyone brave enough to stand up to him. After Hinata left, Mikey told Takemichi to take care of her, calling her a real angel. They then took a stroll through the park on their bikes, enjoying the sunset. Mikey confided in Takemichi, telling him he reminded him of his late brother, who also loved picking fights with stronger guys. Stopping to watch the sunset, Mikey shared his big dream of making the Tokyo Manji gang a force for change, and he wanted Takemichi to be a part of it. As Mikey and Draken rode off, Takemichi wondered how someone as kind as Mikey could turn into the person responsible for Hinata's death in the future. The next day, Takemichi and Hinata went out shopping. When Hinata saw his shitty grades shitter than shit, she insisted on helping him study for an upcoming test. They ended up at her place, and Takemichi couldn't help but admire how pretty her room was. Then her mom popped in with drinks and tell them she's getting old and can now see a grandchild. Embarrassed, Hinata chased her mom out. After they studied, Hinata thanked him for standing up to the thugs who had bullied her brother. She said Naoto looked up to him and was inspired to become a police officer one day. Hearing this made Takemichi happy, but when Hinata mentioned how much he'd changed from ugly, useless, pathetic guy she used to know, he tried not to reveal his secret. Just then, they spotted fireworks outside, and Hinata invited him to watch them on the rooftop. As they stood together, Takemichi reached for peaches, but when he looked over, he realized he'd accidentally grabbed Naoto's hand instead. In an instant, he was back in the present, yelling at Naoto for being a terrible timing blocker. But Naoto was thrilled that the handshake triggered Takemichi's time travel, proving their theory worked. Annoyed, Naoto asked Takemichi if he'd found any gang leaders. Takemichi told him about meeting Mikey, saying he didn't seem like a violent criminal. This frustrated Naoto, who insisted Mikey had started the war that led to his sister's death. But Takemichi believed someone else had turned Mikey ruthless and wanted to meet the current Mikey in the present. Impressed by Takemichi's determination, Naoto agreed to help him. They searched through tons of files and websites, eventually discovering that Takemichi's friend Etsushi was now a key member of the Tokyo Manji gang. Naoto was shocked since Etsushi had once been arrested for stabbing Kiyomasa. They realized Takamichi's time travel had already altered the present, as Atsushi was now a high-ranking gang member. Thinking Atsushi might lead them to Mikey, they went to Takamichi's old place to look up his phone number. Takamichi's room was so disgusting than a dumpyard that Naoto had to leave for a mask and gloves. After some digging, Takamichi found his old notebook with Atsushi's number. When they called, Atsushi surprisingly invited them to meet him at a fancy hotel. Naoto was suspicious, but Takamichi was too eager to notice. Walking through the hotel entrance, Takamichi struggled to keep his cool, especially when he saw all the stylish women around. After confirming their names, the manager led them to the lounge, where Atsushi, now looking like a rock star, greeted them. Atsushi took Takamichi to the rooftop, where they caught up on old times. Takamichi mentioned how lucky Atsushi was to be living the good life, but Atsushi admitted that money couldn't buy everything. Then, shocking Takamichi, he revealed that he was the one who'd pushed him onto the train tracks that day. Atsushi explained that Naoto's timing had saved him, and he confessed he'd only done it because he was following orders from the gang's leader, Kisaki Teta. Takamichi was horrified, struggling to believe that his friend would do such a thing. Atsushi apologized, explaining that Kisaki had been the real mastermind, controlling everything in the gang, especially since Draken had died. He told Takamichi that Mikey had turned dark after Draken's death, and Kisaki had taken over, manipulating everyone. Takamichi was devastated, realizing Draken's death was a turning point. Atsushi then stepped toward the ledge, telling Takamichi it was too late to fix things. Before Takamichi could stop him, Atsushi jumped, ending his life. Heartbroken, Takamichi met up with Naoto downstairs, determined to bring everyone back from this dark future. He now knew Kisaki was the real villain and that he wouldn't stop until he set things right for good. After Takamichi missed work for over 2 weeks because he'd been traveling back to the past, his boss at the video store finally had enough of his shit. She fired him right away and didn't even pay his ugly ass. With no job and frustrated, Takamichi thought maybe he and Naoto could just tell Hinata about her future so she'd be prepared. But Naoto thought this was a terrible idea, saying that if Hinata found out, she might just break up with him out of fear. So Takamichi had no choice. He'd have to go back to the past and fix everything the hard way. Takamichi felt down, especially thinking about Draken's death. Naoto, trying to help, pulled up an article online that described how Draken had been killed in an ambush by a rival gang. The date in the article shocked Takamichi. He only had 3 weeks left to stop Draken from dying. Naoto suggested maybe Mikey and Draken had some conflict that had led to Draken's death. Takamichi didn't know what to believe, but he promised to protect Draken and save everyone, just like they'd planned. He shook Naoto's hand, which activated his time travel powers, and he was pulled back into the past. When he opened his eyes, Takamichi found some massive reason to take a night off. But not knowing what to do, he dashed out of the room, hoping Hinata wouldn't ever find out what just happened. But then, of course, Hinata appeared right behind him, hearing him mumbling to himself. She asked what he was talking about. Embarrassed, Takamichi tried to make up random excuses, but Hinata looked at him strangely, saying he'd been acting weird lately. Takamichi realized that his past self must have been acting oddly, making things more difficult for him in the present. Just then, Takamichi got a call from Draken, asking him to come to an important gang meeting. Hinata, wanting to be with Takamichi, decided to come along. When they arrived, she got nervous seeing how dark and shady the meeting location was. Not long after they showed up, a couple of gang members got annoyed that Takamichi had come uninvited and started pushing him around. But Mitsuya, a division leader, stepped in and told them to back off because Takamichi was a guest of the commander. He then led Takamichi and Hinata to meet Mikey. Draken was there, too, and he even apologized to Hinata for scaring her at school. He then asked Emma, one of the girls in the gang, to stay close to Hinata as her bodyguard for the night. But when Takamichi saw that Emma was the same girl from a past who got some massive plot, he knew there was going to be trouble. Hinata, recognizing Emma too, got angry and slapped Takamichi in the face. Emma quickly explained that she only tried to get Takamichi's attention to make Draken jealous so that he'd notice her more. As the meeting began, Mikey got up and talked about how the gang was having trouble with another gang called Mobius. Takamichi didn't have much time to think before 2 guys ambushed him, knocking him down. One of them was Pa, a division leader who still held a grudge against Takamichi after the incident with Kiyomasa. Pa wanted to teach Takamichi a lesson, but Draken made Pa sit down and calm down. Mitsuya told Takamichi that Pa was mostly upset because the Mobius gang had attacked his best friend and destroyed his friend's girlfriend plot with multiple rots in front of him. Takamichi was stunned that Mobius could be so vicious. Mitsuya explained that Mobius was a powerful gang that controlled a huge part of the city. Mikey then asked the gang what they thought they should do about Mobius, and Pa angrily said he wanted revenge. With a dark grin, Mikey declared that they'd go to war against Mobius. After the meeting ended, Takemichi spent the entire night trying to figure out how to keep Draken safe. He came up with an idea to be Draken's bodyguard, but Draken turned down the offer right away. Still determined, Takemichi decided he'd secretly follow Draken around the city to keep an eye on him. As Takemichi watched them at a restaurant, he noticed that Mikey only showed his lighthearted side when he was with Draken. Draken was like an older brother to him, even giving him piggyback rides when he was tired. Later, Takemichi followed them to a hospital where Draken and Mikey went to visit the girlfriend of Pa's friend, who'd been badly hurt by the Mobius gang. The girl's parents arrived soon after, and her father angrily called the gang members worthless criminals. Mikey, furious, wanted to hit the man, but Draken stopped him and made him bow as a sign of respect. Watching this, Takemichi realized that Draken was the calm influence that kept Mikey under control, and that losing Draken is probably what led the gang to spiral out of control in the future. As they left the hospital, Mitsuda showed up to pick up Mikey, mentioning there'd be another gang meeting tomorrow. Draken nodded, walking away and reflecting on his past. He remembered being abandoned by his parents, growing up on red light area with some hot baddies, and eventually earning the name Draken after getting a dragon tattoo on his temple at age 10. He was already known for being tough and fearless. Meanwhile, back in the present, Takemichi and Naoto continued researching Mobius. They tracked down Asanai, Mobius's former leader, who was now working as a worthless construction worker. They met him at a restaurant, where Asanai seemed nervous and quiet. Naoto calmly asked him about Draken's death, but Asanai angrily banged the table, insisting he didn't know anything. After some more questioning, Asanai finally broke down and admitted that a powerful boss had paid Mobius to start a fight between Mikey and Draken. After telling them everything he remembered, Asanai left. Back at the office, Naoto told Takemichi that if he wanted to stop this from happening, he'd have to go back and prevent the fight between the two gangs. When Takemichi traveled back to the past, he found himself riding a bike with his childhood friend Etsushi. He was surprised to see that young Etsushi still existed in this timeline. He told Etsushi to stay focused on his dreams of opening a celebrity hair salon one day. Then he hurried off to find Mikey and the other gang members. When he arrived at the abandoned building where the gang meeting was being held, Takemichi tried to convince the leaders to cancel the fight with Mobius, but Pa got furious and started beating him up for interfering. Mikey told him their decision to fight was final. Desperate, Takemichi fell to the ground, begging them to rethink it. Draken, noticing how determined Takemichi was, suggested they get more information on Mobius before the battle. This annoyed Mikey, who called Draken weak, and the two nearly got into a fight themselves. Just then, Asanai showed up at their hideout. Seeing the man who had hurt his friend, Pa angrily charged at Asanai, but Asanai dodged and knocked him out with a single punch. Smirking, Asanai announced that he'd heard about their plans, so he'd decided to bring the fight to them first. Behind him stood 50 Mobius gang members, all ready to start the war. Even though the 5 of them was outnumbered, Mikey didn't back down. Standing his ground, he called Asanai a coward for bringing an entire gang to face a bunch of middle school kids. Takemichi couldn't help but stare at Asanai, amazed that this tough gang leader would one day turn into the washed-up guy he'd met in the future. Asanai noticed Takemichi staring and, annoyed, walked over and punched him in the face to knock the expression off him. Pa stepped in, pulling Asanai away, and told him that this fight was between the two of them. He pushed Takemichi to the side, not wanting him to ruin things. Mikey told Takemichi to sit back and watch, but things quickly took a turn for the worse. Asanai absolutely beat up Pa, punching him so hard that he fell to the floor bleeding. He ended up lying in Mikey's arms, weak and barely able to stand. Mikey couldn't just let this go. He walked right up to Asanai and hit him with a strong, powerful kick, smashing him to the ground. The whole room went silent, stunned by Mikey's strength. Mikey told Asanai that his gang could never defeat the Tokyo Manji gang, not even if they tried forever. But Asanai wasn't giving up. He grabbed a broken bottle and ran straight at Mikey. Luckily, Draken jumped in right on time, blocking Asanai's path. Draken kneed Asanai hard, making him drop the bottle, which shattered on the ground. Then Draken looked at the Mobius members and told them that, with their leader defeated, they now belonged to the Tokyo Manji gang. Takemichi was shocked that they'd actually won the fight, but before they could celebrate, they heard police sirens outside. Knowing they had to get out quickly, Draken told the Mobius gang to grab Asanai and leave. Suddenly, Pa got up, pulled out a pocket knife, and stabbed Asanai in the back. Draken pushed Pa away before he could do more damage, stopping him from making things worse. Everyone froze in shock, and with the police getting closer, Mikey shouted at Pa to run. But Pa shook his head, saying he'd stay behind and turn himself in. With no time to argue, Draken grabbed Mikey, and they bolted out of the shed, with Takemichi following close behind. When the cops arrived, they arrested Pa along with the Mobius members who couldn't escape. Takemichi, worn out, began to feel dizzy and fainted in the middle of the road. When he woke up the next morning in the hospital, he found Emma sitting beside him, helping him energies. Curious, he asked her about the others. Emma got emotional, explaining that Mikey and Draken had a huge argument over Pa's arrest, and it caused the gang to split in two. Finally realizing what Asanai had tried to warn him about, Takemichi regretted not being more alert. Emma, feeling sad, cried onto his lap. Just then, Hinata walked in, and when she saw Emma in compromising position Takemichi, she misunderstood the situation and angrily punched him right back onto the bed. Later, when Takemichi was back home, he was so bored that he completed a puzzle just to pass the time. His friends finally came over to keep him company and update him on what was happening with the Tokyo Manji gang. They laughed, saying that Mikey and Draken's argument was just a minor thing and nothing serious enough to actually break up the gang. Right on cue, Draken showed up holding a watermelon for everyone to share. After they finished eating, Draken told Takemichi that Pa was going to be in jail for a full year. Wanting to understand more, Takemichi followed Draken outside. There, he saw Mikey waiting, ready to argue with Draken over who was the better friend to Takemichi. Worried it would turn into a fight, Takemichi tried to calm them down, but Draken grabbed Takemichi's shirt in frustration, which made Mikey furious enough to throw a bicycle at him. They began tossing things at each other, completely wrecking Takemichi's stuff. Frustrated, Takemichi couldn't handle it anymore and tried to jump in, but he ended up face first in a garbage pile. Embarrassed but still mad, Takemichi tried to grab Draken, but his friends pulled him back, stopping him. Fed up with their constant fighting, Takemichi broke down, telling them that this ridiculous argument could ruin the gang in the future, but they didn't understand what he meant. Mikey pointed out some trash stuck in Takemichi's hair, and everyone burst into laughter. The two boys laughed as well, apologizing and making up. Afterward, they all went to the park together, where Takemichi realized that Mikey and Draken were only fighting because they had different ideas about what to do about Pa. Just as Takemichi thought his mission was a success, the girls showed up. After some convincing from Emma, Hinata finally asked Takemichi to be her date for the Dragon Festival. Emma was shocked to see Mikey and Draken back together, but Draken told her the fight wasn't even that serious to begin with. While the girls chatted about the festival, Takemichi joined the guys for a soccer game to relax. The next evening at the festival, Takemichi was excited to see Hinata and the others dressed up in beautiful festival outfits. He was thrilled to be spending time with Hinata, though Draken didn't seem too interested in what Emma was wearing. Hinata teased Draken, saying she wanted him and Emma to be a couple. Then, she dared Takemichi to win her a prize at the shooting game. But Takemichi was terrible at the game and ended up wasting all his money without winning anything. Hinata laughed, but just then, rain started pouring down. They ran into the trees for shelter, and Takemichi realized they were alone. He thought this might be his chance to kiss her. Just as he was about to make his move, his phone buzzed. It was Kazushi, calling to tell him that some gang members weren't happy about the reunion and were planning to attack Draken that night. Takemichi's heart sank. He thought he'd already fixed everything. Frustrated, he apologized to Hinata and ran off to find Draken, mentally kicking himself for getting distracted at the festival. As he ran, he saw a group of gang members up ahead. To his horror, he noticed Kiyomasa holding a knife, swearing to take revenge on Draken for ruining his life. Not knowing what to do, Takemichi froze. But then, an ugly guy saw him and dragged him out into the open, where the gang members mocked him and demanded he bring them drinks. Takemichi tried to stand up for himself, but he quickly backed down, realizing he didn't have Mikey or Draken's support. He apologized, and they shoved him to the ground and tied him up with tape. Kiyomasa stomped on his face, telling him that he'd killed Draken and blamed Takemichi for it. Luckily, Hinata found Takemichi and freed him from the tape. Feeling defeated, Takemichi told her to leave him, calling himself a failure. But Hinata leaned down and kissed him, telling him that even if he wasn't as strong as Mikey or Draken, she still believed in him more than anyone else. Her words gave Takemichi new courage, and he rushed off to find Draken and warn him. On the way, he ran into Mitsuya, who had also heard about the attack and was hurrying over to stop it. When Takemichi told Mitsuya that Kiyomasa was the one planning to hurt Draken, Mitsuya looked surprised. His own sources had told him that Pei Yan, The 3rd Division Vice Captain was actually the one behind the plot. As Draken and Emma walked home, Pei suddenly showed up behind them, and Draken immediately sensed something was wrong by the intense look in Pei's eyes. He told Emma to stay back and walked up to face Pei, who was clearly angry over what had happened with Pa. Just as they squared off, a member of the Mobius gang appeared out of nowhere and hit Draken on the head with a baseball bat. Takemichi and Mitsuya had been rushing over to warn Draken about the planned ambush, but when they got to the parking lot, they found Draken already fighting off Mobius gang members. Emma shouted at Pei, calling him a coward for attacking Draken with a whole gang backing him up. Draken, feeling dizzy from the hit, sat down and told Mitsuya to take over. The Mobius gang members laughed, doubting that Mitsuya could take them on. But just then, Mikey showed up, riding his motorcycle and looking like a total boss. Mikey yelled at Pei for siding with their enemies and demanded to know who had set this all up. At that moment, a tall guy with a cigarette walked forward, introducing himself as Hanma, the new leader of Mobius. Mikey didn't waste a second. He launched his signature kick at Hanma, but to everyone's surprise, Hanma caught Mikey's foot in midair, shocking Mitsuya and everyone around. Hanma grinned, telling Mikey to calm down and saying the real party was just getting started. He ordered his men to attack and threatened to carve out everyone's hearts if they didn't finish the job. Takemichi was overwhelmed, trying to figure out how he could save Draken now. But just then, the other Tokyo Manji members arrived with their bikes, evening the odds. The other division leaders stepped up, and after Mikey gave the go-ahead, everyone charged in, turning the parking lot into a full-on battle zone. While Mikey and the gang leaders took down their opponents with style, Takemichi struggled to stay on his feet as he tried to protect Draken. He felt like giving up but remembered Atsushi's death and pushed himself to keep fighting. Meanwhile, Mikey was furious with Pei for betraying the gang. He fought off all of Pei's gang members and confronted him, asking why he would try to hurt Draken. Pei was angry, saying he hated everyone for abandoning Pa so quickly. He threw a punch at Mikey's face, telling him to fight back, but Mikey, understanding Pei's pain, let him release his anger. After Pei finished, Mikey hugged him, admitting that he was also upset about what happened to Pa, and wanted Pei to come back to the gang. Pei was shocked and couldn't hold back his tears. While the battle raged on, Takemichi spotted Kiyomasa walking by with a blood-stained knife in his hand. Horrified, Takemichi realized what must have happened and rushed over to find Draken, lying on the ground in a pool of his own blood. He yelled out that Draken had been stabbed, trying to get Mikey's attention, but Hanma blocked Mikey, throwing him back. Mikey fought back, throwing kicks and punches, but Hanma blocked every move. Meanwhile, Takemichi realized Draken was still alive. Mikey told him to take Draken to safety, so Takemichi took it upon himself to carry Draken to the hospital. But as he tried to carry Draken on his back, he realized Draken was really heavy and felt like giving up. He kept going until he ran into Emma and Hinata, who had already called an ambulance. They stopped by the side of the road to wait, but Takemichi saw Kiyomasa and his gang coming their way. Kiyomasa and his goons laughed, threatening to tie Takemichi up again. But Draken suddenly regained consciousness. Knowing Takemichi was in trouble, Draken told him to grab the girls and run. However, Takemichi, remembering how he'd always been too afraid to stand up, decided he wouldn't run this time. He told the girls to stay back, stepped forward, and challenged Kiyomasa to a rematch, reminding him of their last fight in the Fight Club. Seeing that Takemichi was serious, his friends started cheering for him, betting that he would finally defeat Kiyomasa. Inspired by their support, Takemichi charged forward, but in his excitement, he forgot to check for weapons. Kiyomasa stabbed him in the hand with a pocket knife. Ignoring the pain, Takemichi managed to pull the knife out and, though he was still too weak to land a punch, decided to switch tactics. He tackled Kiyomasa to the ground and, realizing Kiyomasa was too strong to push down, went into survival mode and bit into Kiyomasa's side, forcing him to scream. Climbing onto Kiyomasa's back, Takemichi held him in a tight headlock until Kiyomasa finally passed out, and they both fell to the ground. Breathing heavily but smiling, Takemichi felt a surge of pride in finally getting revenge on Kiyomasa. But Kiyomasa's friends reminded him that they were still there, ready to attack. Takemichi quickly told Hinata and Emma to find a safe place. Just then, Draken managed to stand up, ready to help Takemichi fight. Though they were both worn out and close to passing out, they prepared to defend themselves. But out of nowhere, Atsushi appeared and punched Kiyomasa's friend, scattering the group. Then the other Tokyo Manji members showed up, helping fend off the Mobius members. Seeing his friends risk their lives for him, Takemichi realized that, even if his mission wasn't perfect, he had inspired his friends to never give up and to keep fighting. The Mobius members, intimidated by the Tokyo Manji gang's fighting spirit, quickly retreated. As they celebrated their victory, Emma and Hinata arrived with the paramedics to take Draken to the hospital. Back in the parking lot, Mikey was still standing strong, and Hanma, worn out, finally called for one of his bikers to help him leave. As he left, Hanma warned Mikey about the rise of a dangerous new gang before riding off into the night. Inside the ambulance, Takamichi held Draken's hand, praying for his recovery. Draken briefly woke up, asking Takamichi to take care of Mikey before suddenly flatlining. The paramedics rushed to revive him, but he was unresponsive. When they arrived at the hospital, Draken was immediately taken in for emergency surgery. Takamichi told everyone what had happened, and Emma broke down in tears. When Mikey arrived, he acted calm, hiding his emotions to keep everyone hopeful. Staring at the operating room doors, he encouraged everyone to stay strong, insisting that Draken was a fighter and wouldn't die so easily. Everyone was inspired by Mikey's words, and after hours of anxious waiting, the doctors finally came out with good news. Draken's surgery was a success. Overjoyed, Mitsuya and the others ran out to share the news with the gang. Takamichi noticed that Pei was standing nearby, looking ashamed for betraying the gang. Mitsuya reassured Pei, saying they all understood his reasons but reminded him that Draken had always been the one who cared most about Pa. He explained that, while Pa was in jail, Draken had visited his parents every day to check in and even brought gifts. Feeling guilty, Pei agreed to apologize to Draken and the others when he could. As Takamichi stepped outside with Hinata and Emma, he realized that he'd successfully completed Nayato's mission to protect Draken. But then he noticed Mikey was missing from the group. Worried, he ran around searching until he found Mikey crying quietly outside Draken's hospital room, finally letting his emotions show after holding them back all night. 1 week after the big fight, Takamichi was feeling like a hero on the streets, his name getting around as someone tough. He decided to check in on Draken at the hospital, expecting some praise. But instead, Draken just laughed at him, calling him an idiot for getting excited over a single victory. Takamichi was annoyed, saying he had a right to feel proud since it had been so long since he felt like he'd won anything. Draken just laughed and pointed to a bag on the floor, saying it was a gift from Mikey. When Takamichi looked inside, he found a gang jacket, Mikey's original one from when he first became leader. Takamichi couldn't believe it, feeling like he hadn't earned such a huge honor. But Draken explained that the gang owed him a lot for all he'd done, and he even bowed his head in gratitude. Draken suggested that Takamichi should talk to Mikey directly about the jacket. So, Takamichi headed up to the rooftop to find him. When he got there, Mikey casually asked how Takamichi had known about the attack ahead of time. Takamichi almost let slip the whole story about time traveling with Naoto, but he caught himself. Mikey, clearly just teasing, thanked him for everything he'd done for Draken and the gang. Feeling accomplished, Takamichi went to see Naoto to return to the present. Before leaving, he gave Hinata a necklace with a 4-leaf clover charm, apologizing for being such a terrible boyfriend. Then, with one last look at her, he shook Naoto's hand to trigger the time jump. Back in the present, Takamichi opened his eyes and found himself back at his job at the video store. At first, he thought maybe he'd just dreamed it all, but when he noticed the scar from his fight with Kiyomasa, he knew it had been real. Just then, his phone pinged with a message from an unknown number inviting him to a meeting. Curious, Takamichi went to the location and was surprised to see Atsushi working at a hair salon, looking happy and healthy. Atsushi told him that he was training to become a hairstylist and wanted Takamichi to be his first client. This made Takamichi emotional, realizing that his plan had actually changed the past. Then his phone rang, and it was Naoto, confirming that the mission had been a success and saying it was time to meet his sister, Hinata. During the ride to Hinata's place, Naoto explained that they had managed to erase the timeline where she died in the gang violence. Takamichi was thrilled, though a little nervous. As they reached her apartment, he started doubting if she'd want to see him after all these years. Feeling panicked, he told Naoto to go ahead without him. He turned to walk away but suddenly bumped into Hinata herself, bringing back a flood of memories that made him tear up. Things were awkward between them, almost like they were on a first date. Naoto noticed this and decided to give them space, but Takamichi begged him to stop like a slave. Later, Naoto takes them outside for some fresh air, however he left for some urgent matter, leaving them with his car. Takamichi's heart pounded, especially when he saw that Hinata was still wearing the necklace he'd given her in the past. Hinata asked if they could go for a walk, and they ended up in a park. She began talking about how much she missed being there with her favorite person, and Takamichi assumed she meant a new boyfriend. But when she turned to him and asked why he'd broken up with her all those years ago, he was shocked. Takemichi realized that in the past, he had been the one to end their relationship. Overwhelmed, he excused himself and went to the restroom to gather his thoughts. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, Takemichi felt ashamed of himself but decided he couldn't run away this time. On his way back to her, he noticed a man in a suit with a familiar tattoo. It was Hanma from the Mobius gang. Panic set in, and he rushed back to Hinata. Just as he reached her, a truck sped toward her car and smashed right into it. Horrified, Takemichi saw that the driver was Atsushi. When he demanded an explanation, Atsushi said he'd been forced to follow orders from Kisaki. Devastated, Takemichi realized that despite all his efforts, the events were repeating themselves. Then, the truck exploded, throwing Takemichi to the ground. When he looked up, he saw Hinata trapped in her burning car. In a moment of desperation, Takemichi rushed to her, even though her legs were pinned and she couldn't move. Holding her close, he told her how much he loved her. Hinata cried with happiness but pushed him away, urging him to save himself. The car exploded just as he got out, and Takemichi made a vow to do whatever it took to save her. The next day at her funeral, everyone came forward to say their goodbyes. When it was Takemichi's turn, he was so heartbroken he couldn't even move. Seeing this, Naoto was deeply moved and broke down in tears. Takemichi, putting aside his own grief, went over to comfort him. Later, while Takemichi was gazing blankly into a pond, Hinata's mother approached him, returning the clover necklace, saying it was Hinata's most cherished possession. She shared that Hinata had truly loved him, which only deepened his pain. Later, Naoto explained that Atsushi's family had been held hostage by Kisaki, forcing him to follow his orders. Feeling defeated, Naoto suggested they might be at a dead end. But Takemichi declared that he wasn't giving up. He announced that he was going to become the leader of the Tokyo Manji gang to stop Kisaki once and for all. Although Naoto thought he finally had it, he admired Takemichi's determination. The two decided to visit Draken, hoping to learn more. They found him in prison, now on death row. He looked worn out, and when Takemichi asked what had happened, Draken explained that he took responsibility for the gang's dark turn. He remembered the good old days when he and Mikey would ride their bikes all night long. Regretfully, he said his only wish was that he'd stopped Kisaki sooner. Before they left, Draken warned Takemichi that Kisaki was after him. Back at Naoto's, they tried researching Kisaki but couldn't find much. Realizing they had no other choice, Takemichi told Naoto he was ready to jump back in time. When Takemichi returned to the past, he found himself at a gang gathering. Mikey was announcing a new 3rd Division captain. To Takemichi's horror, it turned out to be none other than Kisaki Teta. Enraged, Takemichi couldn't hold back and ran up to punch Kisaki in the face. The gang wasn't pleased, and Draken scolded him for disrespecting a captain. Then Baji, the 1st Division captain, jumped in and began beating up Takemichi until Mitsuya held him back. To everyone's surprise, Baji announced he was leaving the gang to join Hanma, declaring himself their enemy. Kisaki seemed thrilled to see the gang in disarray. Afterward, Mikey confided in Takemichi that Baji had been one of his closest friends, and one of the first member of Toman. It hurt to see him leave like this. Mikey asked Takemichi to help bring Baji back, promising that if he succeeded, he'd get rid of Kisaki from the gang. Takemichi agreed, and Mikey officially placed him under Mitsuya's unit. After washing up, Takemichi found a locket on the ground and opened it, finding a photo of the gang's original members as kids. In the photo, he noticed a mystery person with a tiger tattoo on his neck, making him realize this mission was far from over. The next day at school, Takemichi stayed behind, deep in thought about how he could get Baji back into Toman. His friends came up, congratulating him for finally becoming a real Toman member, but Takemichi barely reacted. When he explained the promise he'd made to Mikey that he'd bring Baji back, or he'd fail big time, they could see why he was so tense. Trying to help him out, Kazushi decided to explain more about the gang history in their city, thinking it might give Takemichi some insights. Kazushi started by saying that Toman has around 100 members split across 5 divisions, with each division having about 20 guys. Mobius, the rival gang, used to be split into 2 groups, one started by Asanai, and the other by Kisaki. When Mikey beat Asanai in a brutal fight, the 2 groups of Mobius split apart. Kisaki's crew then joined Toman out of respect for Mikey's strength, which increased Toman's numbers to about 150. Meanwhile, Asanai's half of Mobius joined up with other gangs, creating a new group called Valhalla. As they were talking, a tall guy with a tiger tattoo on his neck walked into the classroom, looking for Takemichi. Kazushi instantly recognized him as Kazutora Hanemiya, one of Valhalla's leaders. Kazutora seemed thrilled to meet Takemichi and invited him to follow him to the Valhalla hideout. Takemichi was definitely scared but knew this might be his only shot at seeing Baji again, so he agreed. On their way, Takemichi asked Kazutora why he'd never seen him around school before. Kazutora explained that he was technically a third-year student but had spent a lot of time in juvie, which made Takemichi wonder what Kazutora had done to land himself there. When they arrived at the Valhalla hideout, an abandoned arcade with a dark, intense vibe, Takemichi noticed how rough and intense everyone looked, like they'd been through too many fights. The hideout was smoky, loud, and a bit intimidating. They joined a crowd gathered to watch Baji beating up another guy. Kazutora explained that this was part of Baji's initiation to join Valhalla. Takemichi was shocked to see Baji going at it so fiercely, throwing punch after punch at the vice-captain of Toman's first division. After he finished, Baji turned to Hanma, asking if he'd proven himself enough. Hanma nodded, clearly impressed, and then asked Kazutora to introduce Takemichi to the rest of the gang members. Kazutora introduced Takemichi as a new member of Toman, and immediately, the Valhalla gang members began chanting for his blood, calling him an offering for the gang. Hanma quieted everyone, saying Takemichi was here to be a witness to Baji's commitment to Valhalla. Takemichi, sweating nervously, confirmed that Baji had indeed left Toman. Hanma asked Kazutora what he thought, and Kazutora vouched for Baji, saying that his inside knowledge of Toman would be a huge asset for Valhalla. Baji then stepped forward, bowing his head, and promised to help Valhalla destroy Mikey and Toman. Hanma was satisfied and handed Baji a Valhalla jacket, making his membership official. Takemichi, though, wasn't giving up that easily. He spoke up, asking Baji why he wanted to leave Toman, a gang he'd helped start. Baji told him that he was only doing this to support Kazutora and reminded Takemichi that Kazutora was also one of Toman's original founders. Takemichi realized with surprise that Kazutora was the sixth member in the old group photo he'd seen. Baji then went into the story of how everything fell apart for Kazutora and why he now hated Toman. He explained that when Toman first formed, they were all excited, taking photos in their new gang jackets and riding around together. Mikey, though, had a slow moped that constantly held them back, and Draken kept teasing him to get a real motorcycle. But Mikey loved his moped, calling it classic. One day, while they were out, a rival gang noticed them, mocking their jackets and calling them a baby gang. The rival leader tried to take Mikey's moped by force, swinging a baseball bat at it. Mikey, however, wouldn't back down, warning the guy to keep his hands off his bike. The rival gang ended up backing down, but it didn't stop Mikey from getting teased by his own friends about the moped. Later, when they were riding to the beach, Mikey's moped ran out of gas. Instead of going to the gas station himself, Mikey ordered Baji, the least weight person, to drag it there while the rest of the crew rode ahead. Baji grumbled but agreed, dragging the moped all the way under the hot sun. But as he was alone, that same rival gang ambushed him. They dragged him to their hideout and beat him up, hoping to make an example out of him. But Baji stayed strong and even shielded the moped from damage. Just as things looked bad, Mikey showed up out of nowhere. To everyone's surprise, he kicked his own moped to pieces, showing the rival gang that he didn't care about the bike but wouldn't tolerate anyone hurting his friends. Then, Mikey and Baji teamed up to defeat the entire rival gang. Then, as Mikey's birthday came closer, Kazutora and Baji decided to surprise him with a new bike. Kazutora suggested they steal it from a bike shop. Baji was hesitant, thinking Mikey wouldn't want a stolen bike, but he eventually gave in. That night, they snuck into a bike shop, Kazutora smashing the window to get in. Baji was still unsure, but when he saw the bike, he imagined how thrilled Mikey would be and decided to go through with it. However, the shop owner came out to stop them, and to Baji's horror, it was Shinekairo, Mikey's older brother and the bike shop owner. Recognizing Baji, Shinekairo was about to ask what they were doing, but Kazutora, panicking, grabbed a heavy tool and hit Shinekairo, killing him instantly. Baji froze, realizing they'd just accidentally killed Mikey's brother. Kazutora, already mentally breaking down, kept muttering, "This is Mikey's fault." Baji, in shock, could only apologize to Shinekairo, but it was too late. When the police arrived, both Baji and Kazutora were arrested. Mikey was devastated to see his friends taken away in handcuffs, and Baji just cried, apologizing, while Kazutora continued to blame Mikey for everything. After that incident, Baji explained, Kazutora grew to hate Mikey and Toman, vowing revenge. Kazutora even took the full blame to keep Baji out of juvie, which is why Baji felt he owed Kazutora his loyalty. In the present, Takemichi listened, stunned to hear that Baji's loyalty wasn't even to Toman. Hanma gave Baji an official Valhalla jacket, making his membership real, and then instructed Takemichi to deliver a message to Mikey. Valhalla would face Toman in a gang battle on Halloween, exactly 1 week from now. That night, Takemichi lay awake, anxiety churning inside him. He'd made a promise to Mikey to bring Badgie back, but now he had no clue how he'd pull it off. If he failed, he knew he'd be in serious trouble, and he couldn't stop thinking about what might happen if he couldn't keep his promise. On his way to school the next morning, Takemichi was stopped by a shady guy near the playground, who asked him to sit down on the swing set for a chat. At first, Takemichi thought he was just some random weirdo, so he ignored him and kept walking. But then the guy introduced himself as Matsuno Chifuyu, vice captain of Toman's 1st Division. Takemichi suddenly remembered Chifuyu as the guy Badgie had beaten up during his initiation into Valhalla. This caught his attention, and he stopped to listen. Chifuyu told Takemichi that Badgie wasn't actually a traitor. According to Chifuyu, Badgie only hit him during the Valhalla initiation to make the attack look convincing, and stop Valhalla members from beating him up more. He explained that Badgie's true reason for joining Valhalla wasn't to turn on Toman but to investigate Kisaki, who Badgie believed was behind the trouble Toman was facing. Badgie wanted to find proof that Kisaki was manipulating things from the shadows, starting with everything that happened after Paul was arrested. Chifuyu then said that he needed help. He wanted to team up with Takemichi to protect Toman from Kisaki's scheming, and together they could gather the evidence Badgie needed to expose him. Takemichi quickly agreed to help, realizing they both had the same goal. Feeling motivated, the two of them decided to start right away. That evening, they joined Mikey and Draken to pay respects at Shinakairo's grave. After offering prayers, Mikey opened up about his brother, explaining that the motorcycle Badgie and Kazutora tried to steal was actually meant to be a birthday gift from Shinakairo. The bike held a special place in Mikey's heart, as it was one of the few things he had left to remember his brother by. Although Mikey had already forgiven Badgie for what happened, he confessed he could never forgive Kazutora for killing Shinakairo. Mikey then turned to Takemichi, telling him that he was prepared to pay the price for failing to bring Badgie back, even if it meant death. Takemichi felt a wave of fear and started to back down. But then he remembered how Hinata had died in his arms in the future. Fueled by that painful memory, he boldly declared that he would make it up to Mikey by becoming the leader of Toman one day, and protecting everyone. Chifuyu was impressed by Takemichi's courage and promised to support him. They agreed to work together. Takemichi would help Chifuyu get closer to Badgie and expose Kisaki's plans. Their first step was to track down Asanai, a former gang boss who had once teamed up with Kisaki. They found him working in a bookstore, and when they introduced themselves, Asanai agreed to share what he knew. He revealed that when he first met Kisaki, Kisaki had offered him power, promising he could make Asanai a respected leader if he followed his orders. As Asanai shared more, Takemichi learned that Kisaki's entire plan from the start had been to control Toman. Kisaki had manipulated everything, including the attack on Draken, hoping to remove Draken as a threat. When Draken survived, Kisaki quickly pivoted, convincing Mikey to let him join Toman as the 3rd Division captain in exchange for supposedly helping Pa. Asanai also hinted that Kisaki secretly ran Valhalla, using it as a rival gang to take down Toman. After leaving the bookstore, Takemichi couldn't shake off how cunning and dangerous Kisaki was. He was controlling things from behind the scenes, pulling the strings of both Toman and Valhalla to reach his goals. Still confused about why Kisaki would join Toman and create Valhalla at the same time, Takemichi decided to jump to the present and get more information from Draken. Back in the present day, Takemichi visited Draken at the detention center and asked him about Valhalla's leadership. Draken dropped a huge surprise by saying that, after the Halloween battle, Valhalla had actually taken over Toman, and Mikey was made Valhalla's leader. Takemichi was shocked to learn that Mikey could end up in such a position. But Draken explained that it happened because Mikey had lost control during the Halloween battle and ended up killing Kazutora in rage. Kisaki had swooped in and covered up Mikey's actions, securing his position as vice commander and effectively taking control of Toman. In the process, Kisaki turned Mikey into a feared gang leader. Draken went on to say that Mikey's change was bound to happen after Kazutora killed both his brother Shinakairo, later Badgie in the fight. These tragedies had driven Mikey to a dark place, making him an easy target for Kisaki's manipulation. Hearing this, Takemichi knew what he had to do. He had to keep Mikey from killing Kazutora during the Halloween battle. He shared his plan with Naoto, who was impressed by Takemichi's determination and encouraged him to go for it. They shook hands to activate the time jump, sending Takemichi back to the past once more. This time, Takemichi found himself in front of Hinata's apartment building. She came outside carrying a gift for him, and Takemichi opened it to find a necklace, the same one he'd given her before. Hinata explained that she wanted them to have matching items, like a real couple. This gesture touched Takemichi deeply, especially since he'd received the necklace back in the future after Hinata's death. He teared up, and Hinata teased him for being a crybaby, not realizing why he was so emotional. Meanwhile, Draken had arranged to meet Kazutora in a dimly lit underpass to try to reason with him. Draken asked why Kazutora still held a grudge against Mikey, especially when Mikey had helped shorten his prison sentence. Kazutora, however, was still bitter and blamed Mikey for the years he'd lost in jail. He warned Draken that Valhalla would crush Toman in the upcoming battle, then walked away, leaving Draken frustrated. The day before Halloween, Takemichi and Chifuyu managed to track down Baji. Chifuyu, hurt and confused, asked Baji if he really planned to fight against Toman. But Baji shocked him by saying he intended to kill Mikey. Heartbroken, Chifuyu walked off, but Takemichi stayed, pleading with Baji not to throw away his life. He reminded Baji that Mikey would be devastated if he died in the battle. Baji shrugged it off, saying he'd do what he had to do, and Takemichi felt the weight of his promise to Mikey. He went to Mikey and told him what Baji had said. But instead of reacting with anger, Mikey said that they'd go into battle with the hope of bringing Baji back to Toman. The next day, Halloween arrived, and both Toman and Valhalla gathered in a massive parking lot for their showdown. The parking lot was filled with gang members, and even outsiders had gathered to witness the fight. A man named Hansen, leader of another notorious gang, stepped forward as the referee. He asked both gangs if they wanted to do a small battle or an all-out war. Draken chose the all-out war, saying that if Toman won, they'd bring Baji back with them. Kazutora, already angry, punched Hansen out of the way and told Toman to bring it on. Mikey signaled his gang to attack, and a wild battle broke out. The entire parking lot turned into a chaotic war zone. Takemichi was trying to find Baji in the chaos but was tackled by a Valhalla member. Just when he thought he was done for, Mitsuya came in and saved him, telling Takemichi to get serious and stop embarrassing the 2nd Division. Another Valhalla member charged at them, but Mitsuya swiftly took him down, reminding Takemichi to stay focused. When Takemichi saw 2 more tough-looking gang members coming toward him, he started to feel afraid again. But then Chifuyu appeared and encouraged him, telling him to fight back. Gathering his courage, Takemichi remembered Hinata's death and channeled his pain and anger into his first punch, managing to knock down an enemy. Kazutora was determined to take down Mikey, launching a fierce punch to send him flying. Just in time, Draken jumped in to block it, but Hanma kicked Draken aside, wanting to fight him one-on-one. Meanwhile, Takemichi kept getting hit but wouldn't back down, even as the Valhalla gang seemed to be winning. Draken, while battling Hanma and his thugs, realized that his Toman team was starting to lose hope. A lot of them wanted to give up, feeling like they couldn't keep up with fighters like Draken and Mikey. At that moment, as Draken braced himself to face Hanma and the Valhalla reinforcements alone, Takemichi started yelling wildly, charging forward and shouting that he'd take down every last Valhalla member. He collapsed into Mitsuya's arms, but his crazy energy inspired the Toman crew to keep fighting. Draken thanked Takemichi for firing up the team and then plunged back into the brawl, knocking down over 50 Valhalla members without even breaking a sweat. With no one else in his way, Draken finally reached Hanma and took him down with a powerful punch, clearing a path for Mikey. Mikey chased Kazutora, who had fled to a pile of wrecked cars, but Kazutora had set a trap, calling in his buddies Chanbo and Chom from Juvie to gang up on Mikey. As they started fighting, Kazutora explained that his plan was to mess up Mikey's balance on the uneven car pile so he couldn't use his famous kicks. Mikey tried his best, but Kazutora ambushed him with a metal pole, hitting him hard. Even after the big blow, Mikey stood up, asking Kazutora why he hated him so much. Kazutora spat back that it was all because of a stupid birthday gift that got him sent to Juvie. Chanbo and Chom held Mikey down while Kazutora kept hitting him over and over. When Draken tried to get to Mikey to help, Hanma blocked him and knocked him back. Kazutora kept attacking Mikey, and Mikey was soon covered in blood. But, even injured, Mikey fought back, breaking free and taking down Chom with a headbutt. He followed up with his signature kick, knocking Kazutora and Chanbo out. Still, the blood loss was catching up with him, and Mikey fell to the ground. Seeing Mikey weakened, Valhalla members decided to finish him off for good. Draken wanted to help, but Hanma kept blocking him. With no one else to protect Mikey, Takemichi stepped up, pushing his way through Valhalla members who tried to stop him. He barely managed to reach Mikey when a Valhalla captain got close, ready to hit Mikey with a metal rod. Suddenly, Kasaki appeared, punching the captain down and announcing that he and his division would protect Mikey. Everyone in Toman cheered for Kasaki, but Takemichi was uneasy. He knew if Kisaki won Mikey's trust, he'd ruin Toman just like in the future. Draken thanked Kisaki, but Takemichi started tearing up, thinking he'd failed his mission to stop Kisaki. Just then, Baji appeared, swinging an exhaust pipe and knocking Kisaki aside. Takemichi was surprised that Baji was actually on their side, but Draken and Mitsuya didn't see it that way. Kisaki's bodyguard grabbed Baji, throwing him down. Kisaki ordered his men to kill Baji, and Baji was ready to fight them off. Chifuyu ran up to Baji, begging him to stop. He told Baji that if he took down Kisaki now, it would make him an enemy of Mikey and Toman. Baji ignored Chifuyu, punched him down, and reminded him that he chose Chifuyu as his vice captain because he thought he was tough. But Chifuyu was too loyal to Baji to fight him, saying he couldn't hit his captain. Frustrated, Baji told him to prove his loyalty in 10 seconds or step aside. When Chifuyu just stood there, Baji moved on, and Takemichi grabbed him, begging Chifuyu to help. But Chifuyu started crying, admitting he couldn't bring himself to hit his superior. In the middle of this, Kazutora crept up behind Baji and stabbed him in the back. Takemichi had been so focused on Baji that he hadn't noticed Kazutora's approach. Baji thanked Takemichi, saying the stab wasn't too deep and didn't hurt much. Then he told Takemichi and Chifuyu to sit back and watch him finish off Kisaki's division. Takemichi offered to help, but Baji said he worked alone. Tying his hair back, Baji entered demon mode, fighting through Kisaki's men with his pipe, showing off his incredible strength. Kisaki told his bodyguard Hamada to be ready, calling Baji a crazy man. But Baji easily knocked Hamada down and pointed his pipe at Kisaki's throat. Just as Takemichi thought Baji would finally take out Kisaki, Baji suddenly started coughing up blood and fell to his knees. Chifuyu ran over, screaming that Kisaki had killed Baji, but Kisaki calmly denied it, saying he hadn't even touched him. Takemichi was horrified. Baji was dying, just as Draken had predicted. To make things worse, Kisaki accused Kazutora of backstabbing Baji, hoping to enrage Mikey. Furious, Mikey charged at Kazutora, but Hanma stepped in to block him. Mikey unleashed his powerful kick, knocking Hanma down, sending the Valhalla members scattering in fear. With no one left to stop him, Mikey went after Kazutora, beating him brutally while the other Toman members watched. Takemichi remembered Draken's warning that Mikey would end up killing Kazutora during this fight. Just when it seemed Kazutora was done for, Baji, barely conscious, called out to Mikey. Mikey was stunned to see Baji alive, even though he was losing blood. Staggering over to Kazutora, Baji declared that he wouldn't die from a single stab and then, to protect Kazutora from blame, pulled out his own knife and stabbed himself. He hoped that by doing this, he could keep Toman together, free of Kisaki's manipulation. As he lay dying, Baji apologized to Chifuyu and told Takemichi to take care of Toman, saying he wanted the gang to stay united. With his last breath, Baji saw visions of Mikey's brother and drifted away. Chifuyu was heartbroken, and Mikey, overcome with rage, went back to pummeling Kazutora. Desperate to stop Mikey from going too far, Takemichi stepped in, yelling at Mikey to stop and explaining that Baji sacrificed himself to save Toman, not to create enemies. When Mikey saw Baji's charm on the ground, he picked it up, realizing that Baji had never actually left Toman in the first place. Mikey remembered back to when he and his friends were just kids. They used to race to their usual hangout spot. And one day, Mikey mentioned that Kazutora was being bullied by older kids in his neighborhood. Mikey wanted to take them on himself, but Baji suggested a different idea. He thought they should form a gang so they could protect each other, with each member having a specific role. They all laughed at first, thinking it sounded silly, but eventually they agreed. Mikey declared that they should call themselves the Tokyo Manji Gang, and even though it sounded a bit cheesy, everyone was in. With Mikey as the leader, they promised to have each other's backs. To celebrate, they wanted to get good luck charms as a symbol of their new gang. But since they were all broke kids, they pooled together whatever little money they had and could only afford one charm. They decided to give it to Baji since it was his idea to start the gang. Now, standing in the present and looking at that same charm, Mikey felt the memories of those days and realized how much Baji had treasured their friendship, even until the end. Tears filled everyone's eyes, feeling Baji's sacrifice deeply. Suddenly, they heard police sirens in the distance, and they knew they had to leave. But Kazutora decided to stay behind, choosing to face the consequences. Before they left, he turned to Mikey, apologizing for everything, for Baji's death and even for Mikey's brother. Then, he calmly surrendered to the police. A few weeks later, Chifuyu visited Baji's grave to pay his respects. As he stood there, memories of how he first met Baji came flooding back. Back in school, Chifuyu had his own gang and was known as the toughest guy around, even stronger than the seniors. When his friends told him about a new guy who was supposedly fearless, Chifuyu was curious and went to check him out. To his surprise, the so-called tough guy was just Baji, a nerdy-looking kid who wore glasses and had fancy hair. Chifuyu couldn't understand why anyone would be scared of him. But one day, after everyone had left school, Chifuyu saw Baji alone in a classroom, frustrated over a test he couldn't pass. He looked so annoyed that Chifuyu decided to help him, showing him how to write the symbols correctly. Over time, they became good friends. One day, while Chifuyu was on his way home, he was jumped by a local gang. Though he put up a fight, they were too many for him to handle. Out of nowhere, Baji showed up, saying he had his back. Chifuyu was worried Baji would get hurt, but Baji confidently introduced himself as the 1st Division captain of Toman and quickly took down the gang leader with a single punch. He defeated the others in seconds, warning them to never mess with Chifuyu again. Chifuyu was amazed to see that Baji was indeed the fearless fighter everyone talked about. From that moment, he looked up to Baji and decided to become his loyal vice captain. Standing by Baji's grave, Chifuyu teared up, still mourning his friend's loss. Mikey soon joined him to pay respects and encouraged Chifuyu to stay strong for Baji's legacy. Meanwhile, Draken and Takamichi decided to visit Kazutora in the detention center. Kazutora had been sentenced to 10 years for his involvement in Baji's death. Draken advised Kazutora to take the time to work on himself mentally, and assured him that Mikey had forgiven him for everything. Kazutora was still considered part of Toman, no matter what had happened. After leaving the detention center, Draken mentioned to Takamichi that Mikey wanted to talk to him at the next gang meeting. Before going home, Takamichi followed Draken back to his place. Takamichi was surprised to see that Draken lived in a fancy area, but he soon realized that Draken's apartment was actually part of a pleasure house. Draken told Takamichi to wait in the lobby while he handled some business. While waiting, Takamichi was approached by a beautiful blonde woman who mistook him for a customer. She invited him to freshen up in the shower and promised to join him. Takamichi, trying to keep his cool, was startled when he opened the bathroom door and saw Draken instead. It turned out the woman had thought Takamichi was there for the pleasure house's services. Later, in Draken's room, Takamichi admired the cool, mature vibe of the space, noticing gang photos on the wall. Draken shared how he had grown up in this place as an orphan and admitted he once felt the urge to harm Kazutora. But he was grateful to Takamichi for stopping Mikey during the fight, which kept things from spiraling out of control. As they left, Takamichi was deep in thought when he spotted Emma and Mikey hugging on a nearby street. He worried that they were in some secret relationship that could lead to a disaster between Mikey and Draken. Just then, Hinata showed up, dressed like a detective, and offered to help him investigate. Together, they followed Mikey and Emma to a restaurant, where the two seemed to be on a date. Seeing Emma's happy expression, Hinata concluded that her friend was in love with Mikey. Meanwhile, Takamichi's eyes wandered to some obvious clues on Emma, earning him a punch from Hinata. Kazushi then joined their spy mission, revealing that he, too, had heard rumors of Mikey and Emma being secretly involved. Hinata, in full detective mode, confidently deduced that Emma was probably dating Mikey. She decided to confront them, just as Draken showed up, looking like he was about to start a showdown with Mikey for betraying him. Takamichi panicked, thinking this would end in chaos, but Draken simply walked over to their table, laughed, and teased Mikey for hanging out with his little sister. Draken revealed that Emma was actually his stepsister and had planned to hang out with Mikey for her birthday. Relieved and embarrassed, Takamichi and his friends pretended to order from the menu so they wouldn't be caught. Draken handed Emma a pink teddy bear as her birthday gift, and she hugged it with excitement, blushing. As Draken left, all the guys admired him for his cool gesture, while Emma watched with a big smile. On the way back, Hinata told Takamichi that she hoped Emma and Draken would fall in love one day, just like she had with him. Hand in hand, Hinata and Takamichi walked off into the sunset, leaving Naoto and Kazushi behind with no one to hold on to. One morning, Takamichi got a call from Mitsuya, asking him to visit his school. Curious and excited, Takamichi showed up the next day. While waiting outside, Pei showed up instead, offering to give him a tour while they waited for Mitsuya. Pei brought Takamichi to the home economics room, where a mean girl mocked Pei for his bad sense of style. As the awkward moment unfolded, Mitsuya finally arrived, saving them from further embarrassment. To Takamichi's surprise, Mitsuya revealed that he was the president of the school's sewing club. He handed Takamichi a beautifully crafted jacket and said it was to thank him for everything he'd done to protect the gang. Takemichi was deeply touched. He'd never received something so thoughtful before. Overwhelmed with gratitude, he bowed his head and thanked Mitsuya sincerely. At the next Toman meeting, Takemichi proudly wore his new jacket. It felt like a symbol of belonging. Draken formally welcomed him as an official member of Toman, making Takemichi feel like part of the family. However, the atmosphere changed when Mikey entered the room with Hanma and Chifuyu by his side. The sight of Hanma made everyone uneasy. Mikey allowed Hanma to speak, and Hanma announced that, after their loss at the Halloween battle, Valhalla had now joined forces with Toman. The gang members cheered, excited that their numbers were growing. But when Hanma revealed that Kisaki had orchestrated the merger, Takemichi's stomach dropped. He realized the future was still at risk because Kisaki was gaining more power. Before Takemichi could spiral into panic, Mikey brought up an important matter: the need to appoint a new 1st Division captain. Everyone expected Chifuyu to take the role, but Mikey surprised them by letting Chifuyu choose. Even more shocking, Chifuyu chose Takemichi, saying it was what Baji would have wanted. Takemichi was stunned. He didn't feel qualified for such a position. But as he thought about the promise he'd made to Naoto and the lives that depended on him, he decided to accept. He lifted his head high, tears streaming down his face, and promised to do his best. After the meeting, Takemichi shook Naoto's hand to return to the present, hoping he had finally fixed everything. When he opened his eyes, he was back at the video rental store. At first, he thought nothing had changed, but then his boss greeted him warmly instead of yelling, which was unusual. Confused, Takemichi stepped outside and saw a sleek black car waiting for him. A familiar face, Kazushi, greeted him as his assistant and opened the car door. Takemichi was completely baffled but got in. During the ride, Kazushi casually mentioned that Takemichi was now the CEO of Tokyo Manji Industries. Takemichi couldn't believe what he was hearing. When they arrived at a luxury penthouse, Chifuyu was waiting for him. Chifuyu led Takemichi to a boardroom where familiar faces like Pa and Mitsuya were gathered. It was heartwarming to see everyone alive and well, but the mood in the room quickly shifted. Hanma accused someone of being a police informant, sparking arguments and tension. While the group bickered, Kisaki walked in, instantly commanding the room. Everyone fell silent and bowed as Kisaki approached. Kisaki invited Takemichi and Chifuyu to a private meeting. Once they were alone, Kisaki surprised them by admitting he had been the mastermind behind Baji's death and other betrayals. He said he regretted his actions and wanted to move forward. Takemichi was stunned by Kisaki's sudden honesty and couldn't tell if it was genuine. They raised a toast to Baji's memory and the company's success. But moments later, Takemichi and Chifuyu felt dizzy. They realized too late that their drinks had been spiked. When Takemichi woke up, he found himself tied to a chair in a dark room, with Chifuyu restrained beside him. Kisaki stood in front of them, his demeanor cold and menacing. Kisaki began interrogating Chifuyu, accusing him of being the informant. Chifuyu, despite being beaten, admitted that he had worked with the authorities because he wanted to rid the gang of people like Kisaki. Enraged, Kisaki pulled out a gun and shot Takemichi in the leg, causing him to scream in pain. Kisaki then turned his attention back to Chifuyu, pointing the gun at his head. Chifuyu used his final moments to tell Takemichi to fix everything and restore the gang to what it used to be. With no hesitation, Kisaki pulled the trigger, killing Chifuyu on the spot. Takemichi was horrified, tears streaming down his face as he watched his friend die. Kisaki then aimed the gun at Takemichi. With a chilling smile, he called Takemichi my hero before pulling the trigger. And that's where this ends. Watch this next video and like this video for next part.